Welcome to the Brand Success Podcast, where you'll hear amazing stories from people like you who overcame their fears, frustrations, and obstacles on their way to brand success. Join us to be inspired by how they persevered, pivoted, and powered on to success. Not easy, but they did it, and so can you.
Welcome, my friends. Kay Wagner here from North Star Marketing. And today I'm very excited because we have with us a very dear friend and business colleague, Lynne Breil of the Professional Edge. Lynne's been in business for, I think, almost as long as I have, right?
Yes, I would. I started my business in 95.
95.
Yes.
Yeah. And so today, Lynne continues to have a really fantastic brand, very successful, and she is going to tell us about that. So, Lynne, take it away.
Well, I'll start with the end in mind. You've asked me to tell you about my brand. My company is the Professional Edge Incorporated, and we are a go-to resource for people skills at work. And that includes people skills training in the areas of business etiquette, leadership development, executive coaching, and presentation skills. But I didn't start there. As a matter of fact, I started my business not even wanting or figuring I would be starting a business. Mm-hmm. It went something like this. I had been on the faculty of your college for about 10 years, and I was approached by the head of the communications department, where I taught a class in public speaking, to work with a group of managers for a large company in our central Pennsylvania area. And actually, the reason I was contacted was because everybody else on the communications faculty had no interest in stepping off campus and working with a company. But I did. Now, the year was 1995, and you know, as I do, that the resources were somewhat limited. I mean, you didn't Google something. You didn't have the access to the internet that we have now. I had a bookstore. So I went to the bookstore and I bought the only book that was on the market at the time that addressed executive manners. Because when I talked to the client and realized that what they were looking for was a way to prepare their managers to go out and meet clients and attend conferences and make positive first impressions and give presentations, I realized what they were really looking for was business etiquette. So that became a catchphrase that I used to start my company. And in 1995, with Letitia Baldridge's book, The New Guide to Executive Manners, I will never forget that she, in her book, said that manners in business are based on three things: kindness, efficiency, and logic. And I would say that's probably how I tried to set myself apart as a brand. But let me get to that part first. I took the job with the client and that offsite as a professor. And as I worked with them for a couple of months, I realized that on one of my treks back and forth to my home in York, you know, what I've written for them, what I've developed for them, there's got to be other companies who could use this same kind of information. And that was how I started my business. And so I looked for others who may have done the same thing or would be doing business etiquette type of work with clients. And I found a woman in Cincinnati whose company offered similar programs. And I found her through reading a business journal. And she, ironically, was offering a certification for others who were interested in doing business etiquette training. So I became certified, one of the first 4 women in the country to be certified as a business etiquette trainer. Over the years, what I did, you know, I as far as how I branded myself, my journey includes meeting colleagues in my speaking and training industry. And, you know, remember, now I didn't know that I didn't start my business intending to start a business. So I didn't even know there was a speaking and training industry. When I met colleagues in this industry, I learned a couple of things. Number one, I learned the industry itself, the speaking and training industry, that I did not know. Number two, I learned how to market and brand within the industry by watching those colleagues and by learning by marketing trends and branding trends. And I learned that by joining industry groups, which I would recommend to anyone starting a business. Find an industry group that specifies or is designed to help you learn about your industry, and you will. And then the third thing, you make contacts. And maybe you think, well, those are your competitors. Well, they might be, but on the other hand, they also can refer you to clients.
Right.
So I had an opportunity through joining industry groups and infusing myself in the industry to learn how to brand and market, to learn the industry and to meet others who do it and get contacts with potential customers. Mm-hmm. So today I would characterize my brand as people skills, because there actually is a people skills website, a soft skills association, and it pretty much describes what I do as far as your impression and how you look and how you sound and how you communicate, and of course the all important component, which is how you behave in business. Right. And the first, I actually met someone through an industry group who helped me with my first tagline, which was image, etiquette, and communication. So that was my first tagline under the professional edge. Today, my tagline is people skills at work. So I thought that was a pretty good tagline. If you want to build your brand, I would say the three most important things when you're building your brand is, and I've said it before, presence in the industry, number one. Number two, to be a resource to the clients that you have and your potential clients. What I mean by being a resource to them is, obviously we're in this industry, this business to make money and to get clients to hire us to do work for them. But what about if it's outside of our scope of what we do well? How good are you at referring or helping that client find someone who can help them? I think this is something that I've really learned over the years, that the clients actually call me and maybe they know that this is not my area of expertise, but they also know that I can help them find someone, or at least I'll try to connect them to someone who can help them with what they need. And also building your brand means, I'm looking at my cheat sheet here, but honing in on your communication skills. How good are you at, or how much do you pay attention to consistently, and I mean consistently, to how you look, how you speak, and how you write and choose your words? Because that's really essentially what I do, obviously in my brand. But my brand dictates that I look as good as I can, that my image is professional. My brand dictates that I write professionally. I don't use poor grammar or slang or misspell people's names. That my brand dictates that I pay attention to how I sound and the tone of my voice. That's what my brand dictates. So that's how I built my brand. And what I wish I would have done differently, probably a million things, but I know that I could have had a bigger web presence. You always can. I know that I could have been more diligent with social media. I know that I could have marketed on a larger scale, but that would mean a couple of decisions in other areas, which would be bringing in new people and managing that. So I made a decision to stay small and use people as subcontractors to work for me in my company and represent the professional edge. But I'm a little protective because of what I do, that I don't want to farm this out to just anyone. So I've stayed small so I can have more control over how my company is representing. And biggest lesson learned, well, always be a student, and in learning about your industry. You can never know everything. And setting goals was important for me, although I changed them around so much. But goals for me meant doing something, maybe it's one little thing each day that made me feel a sense of accomplishing something.
Right.
And something that's meaningful. And maybe it's just writing a handwritten note to a client, thanking them for their business or thanking them for something that they've done for me and with me. So I'm ready for questions that you have. I wanted to make sure that I covered all the points that you had suggested that I talk about.
Right.
So, okay. So what questions do you have, Kay?
Okay. So I know that in the past couple of years, you've also written several books. So tell us about that experience, about what you learned from that, how you kind of walked through that whole process of deciding to do that, and then actually, you have two great books, so tell us about them.
As a speaker, you're almost shamed into writing a book.
Right.
You really are, because anyone who has spoken from the platform and is a claimed expert usually has a byproduct that's a book or some kind of published resource. So I've been working at this for a long time, and there are two ways you can write a book. You can either self-publish or you can get a publisher to do that work for you. I was fortunate enough through my educational connections to have a publisher actually hire me, like my idea for a book, and send me a contract. And that was really the cog that got the wheel turning for me to write my first book. I actually self-published a little pocket guide on business dining etiquette. That was my first project about 6 years ago. And then just last year, I finished, and it was, I don't want to scare people away when I say it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Right.
And you know this because you've done the same thing. Hardest in terms of not just making sure that you have the information that you want and it's written well, but also it's the logistics of publishing a book, the agreement and just that process that I don't need to go into now. But, I highly recommend it. And for me, did it make me millions of dollars? No, but it gave me millions of opportunities to talk about it. And so the book that I published last year was Best in Class, and it is a book I call Etiquette and People Skills for Your Career. So it serves me in two ways. It is a book that I've used with client groups and not just new hires who are trying to make a good impression in their first job, but also I've had a number of human resource professionals like this book and keep it on hand and use it as part of their orientation training for new employees. And then the book is also used as a textbook in several classes at your college and at other universities. And the book that will be coming out probably in about a week, I believe.
Oh, awesome.
I know, is a presentation skills workbook that I've titled Making the Grade. Presentation Success from Classroom to Conference Room. And so it, again, is a book that can be used for students, but also for my clients when I'm hired to do presentation skills training. And the workbook will look a little bit different than my Best in Class book, because you will work through it. And there are planning pages, and there's a website where you can download planning pages. So I'm really excited about that. And I wish I could hold that up the same way as stuff. But we're probably about 5 days early. They are bundling it up in the publishing house and getting it sent to me so that I can begin to use that with my students and my clients.
And how do people find your books?
I have right now a website on Best in Class that you can go to find Best in Class, bestinclassbook.com. And right now we are in the process of launching another website that will include all of my books. So I'm not ready to announce that link just yet because we're still in the process, because we thought, wait a second, we have 3 books and we have clients who ask about this, clients who want to find out more about this. And so we'll be developing a website that will go for just the products that we've published. So that, again, is in queue.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Let's talk about, let's stay on etiquette for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, because I know you and your business, that you do actual etiquette sessions, let's say. And you do etiquette sessions with colleges for people who are going to be going out in the work world, and also for people who have been newly hired. So if I remember correctly, you have maybe attorneys who have new people coming in, or businesses. I don't think it's just one kind of audience, right? It's like a lot of different companies.
It is, yes, it is. And it is also people who want to know, maybe they're seasoned professionals, who would like to know, okay, what are the 7, I'll use the term that I used to describe the presentation, what are the 7 deadly sins of business behavior in the 21st century? What is it that really bothers people?
Right.
Because no matter how long you've been in your profession, sometimes we get used to doing things a certain way. Trends dictate that they might or should be done a different way.
Right.
We have how many generations are in the workplace now? Was it 3, 4?
4, probably, yeah.
Okay, that presents a whole new different set of not rules, but
behavior.
So what fits 4 generations?
Right.
I think really what fits 4 generations, and that's what I tried to speak to when I was putting my book together. But you're in the middle of asking a question, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So the context is that you literally have a dining session, right? With full out eating a dinner.
It's hands-on. It's hands-on, yes. We've done this for mostly colleges and universities, which represents probably about 10% of my client base. So not a lot, but this is a program that, I've been doing for as long as I've had my business. And hands-on means that I'm literally watching them teach as the courses are coming out. And it's not the time to sit back and relax and let your guard down. It's a learning session. So it's fun. People laugh at themselves. I give them instances and examples of how they can go wrong in a dining setting. And plus there's food. And it's fun.
Right. So what my question actually is, what are some of the funniest things that you've seen people do?
At dining?
Yeah, in your dining class. I mean, you must see some really funny things.
I do. I've seen quite a few things. It's not just, understand that most of the times when they come to my class, they're at their best behavior.
Right.
It's stories that they tell me that I can just imagine. People who spill something on a necktie and then lick that, or, we're just ordering the wrong thing and not knowing how to handle it, and things leaping off, pieces of food leaping off of the table, and not knowing if you should retrieve them or just let go. Yes, I've seen a lot of funny things. I actually, this is not funny, but when you think of probably one of the occasions that I will never forget doing a dining session was that somebody literally got sick and threw up during the meal in the room, auditorium where we were. And that was really hard for me to get the group's mind off of that and move on. It was just, oh my gosh, it was the worst. It was the worst thing that could possibly happen. But one of the things that we do that to have a lot of fun with is I don't just teach domestic dining. I like to talk about international dining. Because, we have all kinds of restaurants. And one of the things we do is we introduce chopsticks.
Oh.
It's really funny to see people use chopsticks. Now, we don't give them a course of food to use with chopsticks. We give them a pack of Smarties, or maybe a little bowl of gummy bears, something that's relatively easy for them to on. But you would be be surprised how many people just cannot and have a tough time with chopsticks. And then I learned that, they have a contingency of people in their industry who are from Asia. So I'm thinking, you need to practice this because you never know.
Yeah. That's funny. Let's talk about technology because in the time that you've been teaching presentation skills and communication and soft skills and etiquette and all of that behaviors in the workplace, technology has had a tremendous impact on how we communicate, when we communicate, the fact that we're basically can communicate 24/7 and often do. The gray area, I would say, between personal and work. So we have a couple generations in the workplace who have grown up with technology. And they are not nearly so concerned about, let's just look at texting and email and the fact that to some degree it has its own language, right? So we do LOL and we do all of these other things like that. And a lot of people rely on spell check for correct spelling of just simple words like they are, their, THEIR, all of those kinds of things. So what is your counsel or your advice to generations, like the millennials and maybe even Generation X and even people who just say, okay, well, I'm just going to do it the way everybody else does it, and I'm going to use all of the shortcuts in the language and that kind of thing. What is your counsel or advice? Because we're speaking about the workplace now, right?
Yes.
And so there was a time, as you well know, that people would, like administrative assistants, were reluctant or told not to give out email addresses, right? That goes back away.
Yes.
And then there was a time when you would never give your cell phone number out. And then now nobody even has landlines. So everybody is, primary way of communicating is cell phones, which is actually not even talking on them, and they're smartphones. It's not even talking on them. It's either using them to text, to messenger, to email, all of that. So that presents then a different way of communicating that we have gotten used to shortcuts in the language. See you soon. See you.
Sure.
Those kinds of things.
Well, the first thing, number one, I'll tell you what I think the biggest problem is, the biggest mistake that I see when people email in a professional setting. And that is the lack of a signature block. I cannot tell you how that's number one. Before you do anything, you set up a signature block that includes, or, it dictates another way for people to reach you. So if you want to put your direct office phone number on there or your mobile device number on there and a website, I wouldn't suggest putting the quote of the day and how you feel about, I don't know, sushi or something like that. I had this Japanese thing, but I would suggest that you have a signature block that has your name, your title, and those other things that I mentioned, because people may want to pick up the phone. And if they want to pick up the phone, make it easy for them to do that. Number two, just like you said, there's text language and there's email language. And aside from that, there's internal communication and external communication. So here's maybe the litmus test. If you're emailing outside of your organization, imagine that what you're writing, ask yourself, if I were to put this on the company letterhead, the physical letterhead paper that, I don't know if we use anymore or not, would it pass that test? Would it be okay to go on the company letterhead? And when I ask myself that question, it really makes me think about cleaning up some of the grammatical and the fragmented sentences and so on and so forth. Look, I don't care what you do internally. Well, I do, because, the larger the organization, you may still be needing to establish rapport with somebody, and that counts too. But externally, you really want to be mindful of some of those things. And if dating websites, what I'm hearing people say is that misspellings on people's profiles and poor grammar, that's a deal breaker. So if it's a deal breaker on a dating website, imagine how to look at your clients.
Right.
Does that answer your question pretty much about how you're determining? And then it speaks also to the four generations that we currently have in the workplace. What we're looking for now is what is the most risk-free way to communicate where you're understood. So if you think somebody's not going to get it with an emoticon or an acronym, then don't write it.
Right.
Because you're just going to spend time going misinterpretation of this because for me, as a baby boomer, I might not get it. Mm-hmm. One of my students, this was funny, and you're mentioning about emailing from your mobile device. And of course, what was it, 70% of people open their emails, 75% on a mobile device. No different. The rules still apply. Mm-hmm. You still need full sentences, correct spellings, grammar has to be correct. Forget the slang. But one of my students emailed me from it was his mobile device, after class, and sent me an email that said, "Professor, I would like to sleep with you after class." Now, look, there was a misspelling in there because I knew that he meant to say, "Professor, I would like to speak with you after class."
Right.
So, when I tell that story, and it's a true story, people say, "I would have just dropped that. I would never shown my face again." Well, I get that. I certainly get that. So he was just mortified, so embarrassed. Yeah. And that was just a little tiny tweak that could have been changed had you reread your text.
Just an autocorrect or an auto incorrect. Yeah. Okay. So another issue with technology is social media. So you have kids who have been on social media and they're coming out of college and they're going into the workforce, or they've been out of college for a while, they're going into the workforce, and they don't realize the implications of what they're doing on social media. Mm-hmm. So it is standard operating procedure right now that if an HR director or VP is hiring somebody, they're going to do their due diligence and check out Facebook and, all of the other social media platforms. So what is your advice to people who were doing social media and not even ever thinking about the impact in a job search?
Mm-hmm. It's called grandma's house rules. If you wouldn't want your grandma to see it, let it pass the grandma test for social media. And that's a good place to start. Most people know what I mean when I say that.
Right.
But in addition to that, it's about your email address as well. So, I have students coming out of universities and they have a Gmail address like beer pong champ 99. And, that's not a good email address to use when you're communicating with a potential employer.
Unless you're going to work for a beer company.
There you go. There you go. You're right. Yes. So that's another, and I've seen that mistake as well. Mm-hmm. So, it's the grandma's house rules, and you change your email, again, make everything consistent. I think the mistake that many college graduates, whether it's undergraduate or graduate, is that they feel that their brilliance is going to get them past all of that. The social media posts and the way they write, because they have a degree or they're really smart or they had a 3.9 GPA. That's not true, because in order at this stage in their career, their brilliance, they still have to prove themselves. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing something that interferes, that gets in the way, mm-hmm. Like dressing inappropriately or having a social media post, that's going to get in the way of your being able to represent yourself as an mm-hmm. intellectual who has a lot to offer. People, it just does at this point in your career. So make sure that you have nothing standing in the way mm-hmm. Of you being able to showcase your intelligence and what you bring to the company.
So recently, I've had some conversations or been around some kids that are coming out of college, and I've been really kind of amazed because they've all talked about what kind of clothes they want to get for interviews, job interviews. Mm-hmm. And they're actually looking like at sports coats and jackets, and the girls at suits, or, jackets and skirts or something like that. And I just found that really interesting because we went through and still, tend to be very casual at work and casual really in a lot of areas of our life. So maybe that whole thing is going to start shifting again. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I have. I think when you ask students, young professionals, what's a good professional look, that's probably mm-hmm. the way they would describe it. Now, I don't know where that's coming from. And when I researched dress codes and I put mm-hmm. together for my book, I did a lot of research on particularly business casual, because there's where the conundrum is. People don't know what that is.
Right.
People misinterpret it. Does it mean flip-flops?
Right.
And it can mean anything from a sport coat mm-hmm. to flip-flops, right. Depending on your industry. Mm-hmm. So I actually forgotten your question. You want to know where it's coming from. I don't know, but I'm glad. Oh, you're asking me, is there a return? Well, I hope so. Mm-hmm. I hope so, because think about it this way. People behave better when they're well dressed. They just do. And years ago, when airlines would upgrade people to mm-hmm. first class, I think, really, I do, that, if you have two people standing there who could qualify for an upgrade, mm-hmm. and one's dressed professionally, and one looks like a slob carrying a pillow and wearing sleep pants, who's going to get the upgrade?
Right.
Who are they going to put in first class?
Right.
And it's true. I've seen it happen. Mm-hmm. It happen. Now today, forget, all bets are off today with that for the most part. But I think people act better and they just behave better. They're on their game better. The problem is that as we have a lot of professionals who you say may describe that as business professional dress, many still don't know exactly what that is. Right. And many still make the mistake of wearing something that they might wear clubbing, mm-hmm. Because it's dressed up. You've spent mm-hmm. a lot of time getting yourself ready for that event, like going out, to a club, which there's a distinct right. difference. And I do see, particularly with young women, make the mistake of wearing something that really emphasizes some biological attributes that is completely right. inappropriate. But they don't know because someone along the way has complimented them. Yes. Said, you look great in that. Oh my gosh, you look so fabulous. That's all they need to hear. Mm-hmm. So I believe that counsel is still needed. And I found in my classes that students still tell me they're really not sure. They don't know what colors mm-hmm. are appropriate. But also, here's the other thing that we forget about. And with a limited budget, this may be difficult. The fit. I alluded to that with the women wearing something very form-fitting, but I'm finding that young men, if they're buying a sport coat, even women too. I don't know why I'm segmenting this with gender, but when things don't fit well, they don't look well.
Right.
And so I see a lot of guys, young men in particular, buying suits that don't fit. They haven't gotten them tailored. And it's distracting when you're looking at them and, you see a suit that doesn't kind of tugging at things and they're pushing things up or pushing things down. My youngest son is 6'4", and we realized when he was a junior in college and was going to job fairs that he couldn't go into a store and buy off the rack. There were he couldn't. He had, because of the sleeve length, and he had a tough time understanding that. But and it was more expensive. But to get him a sport coat or a suit jacket that fit, we had to be very careful. We had to specially order it, or a store that carried a lot of different sizes. So,
yeah. Well, I think in closing, there's still a lot for people to consider in making that transition into the workplace. And then even after you've been in the workplace, as you're moving through your career, things are going to change, and you really need to understand, like you've been saying, what are the trends and how do you present yourself? Because the age-old adage, you never get a second chance to make a first impression, is still very valid. And I think, in your work, it's not just a first impression, but it's also those skills that can take you further in your career if you are a good presenter, a good communicator, can network and build a network. And we haven't even touched on that today because I know you teach that as well.
That's another area.
Yeah.
Well, we did sort of touch on it, Kay, because I mentioned about getting involved in industry groups.
Right.
It would be the entree to network.
Yeah.
There it is. Sure.
Yeah. And there are nuances in how you network, and, that kind of has its own set of guidelines to be a good networker. But I want to thank you for being on the podcast and the YouTube video with me today. I want to also recommend to my friends who are watching and listening to find your book, and we will put up, when we produce the book, the video, we'll put up the URL if you have the URL ready.
Absolutely.
And we'll put that up, and also all of your contact information so people can get in touch with you. I highly recommend that if you are in the corporate world or even in small business, just in business in general, that you get Lynne's books, and that if you are in a position where you want to bring Lynne in to, train or to help people who are younger who are earlier on in their careers, Lynne is an expert at this. She's done this for many, many years and has really helped a lot of people to be able to do to get the professional edge, right?
That's what you said.
Which is what the name of Lynne's company is. So, Lynne, I want to thank you for being here. And to my friends who are following our podcast and watching our YouTube videos, I know that you've enjoyed this segment, and we will see you soon. And that's a wrap.
You just heard another great formula for brand success. What's your secret sauce or magic formula? Post your story on our Facebook page called Brand Buzz. Then come back soon for the next brand success story that's cooking up right now.